Hi, I'm so happy to be here for this great book. I'm just going to introduce our panelists so I don't have to stand out here by myself. She's an associate editor at Bustle and author of the new book, Glop, Non-Toxic Expensive Ideas That Will Make You Look Ridiculous and Feel Pretentious. Coming out on December 6th, Gabby Moss. And she's a writer and comedian who has written for Why with Hannibal Buress and The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. She's also been featured on MTV and her web series Clench and Release, and performs stand-up around the country. Charlotte Lauriston. And she's a GLAAD award-winning writer who currently writes on gender, sexuality, and culture at the New York Times, and is the author of the acclaimed feminist Fight Club, a book with no bullshit advice on combating sexism in the workplace. Jessica Bennett. She is the co-founder of Reductress and co-author of How to Win at Feminism. She has over a decade of experience in the NYC comedy scene and has contributed to The Onion and McSweeney's Beth Newell. And she is also the co-founder of Reductress and, you guessed it, the author of How to Win at Feminism. She has written and produced plays and other works throughout New York and Chicago. Sarah Pappalardo. Thank you guys all for being here. I was also invited here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
So I would like to start broadly, and I want to encourage you guys all to interrupt each other politely if you want. Can you say, so feminism has changed a lot, and I think Reductress is really doing a good job of saying what it is today. But could you guys all talk about what you think feminism and being a feminist means in 2016 versus in 2006 or 1980? You don't have to say that.
I think one of the biggest strides we've made is that we no longer have to be likable or smile. Yeah.
Have we, though?
Though we do get asked to smile.
If you're in
my
an Uber,
heart.
you better smile, or they'll take you away. I think, to me, what's changed the most is socially, as a culture, we see people, if people aren't being treated fairly, it's like very absurd to us now. It's like, why wouldn't you just treat a woman like a person? I think that's the biggest change.
I think that we're more comfortable using the word now. In 2006, my book is called Feminist Fight Club, and in 2006, that was the year that I joined a real-life feminist fight club. And the first rule of the Fight Club was we didn't talk about it outside of the club, and that was because people really did feel that if it got out, they were in a feminist consciousness raising group, they would be penalized in their offices. So, what Beyonce does, the rest of us follow, but I think that feminism has gone through various eras, but we're in an era where we're embracing the word again, as well as the ideals.
And 2006, iPhones existed then, that wasn't long ago.
iPhones existed, but I know I would have been like, female presidential candidate, LOL, get practical. And, that stuff, a lot has changed. So much has changed in such a short period of time.
I think social media has really transformed the conversation too, where it's more democratized and sort of anyone can insert themselves into the discussion, and if they have a decent enough point to make, it starts to get some traction, I think. So.
Yeah, I think based on the number of secret Hillary Clinton Facebook groups there are out there, a lot has changed since the last election.
But not enough.
Not enough.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. But so with kind of a trend that I'm seeing largely in the past 5 years is empowerment, women's empowerment marketing specifically. Do you guys think that this is so reductive? But is this a good trend that businesses have started to pick up, that feminism is a good way to sell things to women?
I got a lot of feels on this. So I hate the word empowerment because I think it's a watered down version of feminism. And why can't we just use feminism? But that said, brands have a lot of power, And if they're going to be selling us crap anyways, they might as well kind of do it with a positive message, where in the process, maybe we start to notice that we're apologizing too much. I'm referring to the Pantene ad that's all about saying sorry, and then at the end it's like, you can stop saying sorry and shine strong by washing your hair with Pantene. Which I actually thought was a very good ad, but then at the end you're like, really? So I try to stay away from this watered down talk about these issues, and I proudly call myself a feminist, and I try to avoid empowerment.
I mean, I think anytime a corporation kind of just takes and uses a social movement, it will eventually be shitty anyway. So it's like fine that they're doing it now, but they're eventually just going to water it down and make it into something else. Like, God forbid Black Lives Matter becomes like super cool. And then you're gonna see it all over the place. Like, buy this Black Power comb. It's gonna be stupid.
This new soap.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely frustrating, I think, to see the watered down version, but then it's also like when you see your mom catch on to something 10 years after you, you are kind of like, okay, I guess it's good that she got that, you know?
Yeah.
Even if it's in this weird, like, sitcom-esque format, it's like better than nothing.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we'll know we've reached the true end of it when, like, men need to be empowered too. Like, I want to see men's empowerment advertising as much as women's empowerment. 'Cause I don't understand, like, why we as a gender need empowerment more than anybody else. It should be equal.
I feel like razors are trying to make men feel like men.
Yeah.
Razor blade marketing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not the same.
Swiffer, the Swiffer ads that premiered during the Super Bowl last year were all about men cleaning, which is the counterpoint to that, which I actually think is a good thing. Like, if we're gonna have advertising, and this is another way feminism has changed. I think that the idea of capitalism used to be very much rejected by feminists, and today they sort of go hand in hand in some sense.
Have you guys purchased, so in your recent memory, what is the most feminist product you've purchased, and how has it contributed to combating our patriarchal values?
I actually, as soon as I heard about the pink tax, which I never knew about, I was like, what the fuck? I'm being extra taxed? I spend so much money on being a girl. So I have started buying men's products now. Yeah. So I buy men's razors if they're cheaper. I actually just buy whatever the cheapest thing is because it's all just branding anyway. It's all just how they design the bottle and how they design the graphic. So
also, men's deodorant smells better. Why do we have to smell like baby?
It's the same thing.
Truly, you cannot not smell like baby powder and buy female deodorant.
The men's razors have more blades.
Oh, and they will last for 10 years
They're
if you get the reusable
razors.
ones.
Yeah.
That's just advice to all of you.
So I guess we're saying men's product.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that counts.
Barbasol shaving cream.
That really counts. So I want to move on to the workplace. I feel like this is not really an issue, I think, except for you, Jessica, because everyone else here, well, actually, I don't know about Charlotte, but work in female-dominated workplaces, which is a dream for me.
Definitely not me.
Okay, definitely not you. So have you encountered, I've noticed kind of switching between women's dominated workplaces and men's dominated workplaces, that the culture changes in kind of unexpected ways. Can you talk about what the experience is like? I think just interestingly in workplaces where it's basically all women and workplaces where it's very much not.
Go ahead.
It's a female-dominated workplace. I'm going to defer to you.
I actually think that a lot of the issues that women face in an office environment persist whether we're in a female-dominated or male-dominated. Certainly, I bet you have horror stories that I'm not experiencing. Now I work from home, and so I don't talk to anyone all day. But I began my career in a very traditionally male magazine environment, white male. And in addition to there still being some sexist structures and daily subtle microaggressions, like constantly being interrupted when you spoke or pitching an idea and having that same idea appear in the magazine under a man's byline a couple of weeks later. There were things like negotiating that I had to learn how to do. And what the research shows is that women have a harder time negotiating because when they do, they're viewed as pushy and aggressive. And so whether you're in a male or a female-dominated environment, those biases are real and they're not just divided by gender. They're unconscious in many cases, and men and women exhibit them. So I do think that the idea of sexism at work and how gender plays into our workplaces is really relevant, no matter your industry or the level of men versus women you have. That said, I want to hear what you have to say.
I mean, okay, how do I start? Because I started my career as a staff assistant for Senator Gillibrand in New York City. And so I worked for a really powerful woman. And Senator Gillibrand took over for Hillary Clinton when she became Secretary of State. So that office was very mixed. And I think being in a political office teaches you kind of how to be a badass no matter what, because people are always yelling at you. It moves really fast. No one cares about your feelings, whether it's a woman or a man. So you're dealing with a lot of power anyway. And then my first writer's room was for Tina Fey. So it's like I have the baddest bitch on the planet. Like I'm working for the baddest bitch on the planet. And that writer's room was very mixed. But then my next writer's room was Y, and that was all male, and I was the only woman in that room, and I'd never experienced that before, ever. And it was racially mixed. There were black men and white men, but I was the only woman at all on the writer's staff, which I just found so weird. It was so absurd to not have any women around at all. And I just imagine all of the writers' rooms before this that had just been completely male and no one calling out how weird that was. And it's just like, guys, this doesn't work, you know? Like, you gotta have some sort of diversity of worldview in here. And I found that in that all-male writers' room, I became like a little baby. Like, that was just scared to talk, scared to pitch, scared to be myself. When other people would pitch, they would be like, Charlotte, this is kind of gross, or something like that. They'd like, they'd be like, because I'm a little baby, and I can't hear like a sexual pitch or whatever, even though my pitches were like filthy, but so that kind of micro condescension kind of thing that would happen would like chip away at my my confidence and my self-esteem, and I didn't really want to pitch, and I felt like I wasn't good, because how could I be good? I'm the only girl here. And then the next writer's room I was in was half women, half men, and the women were all very outspoken, very brilliant, very, like, they'd had a lot of experience, and I found that in that writer's room that I opened up the most I'd ever opened up in any room. I was just like so empowered by these women doing whatever the fuck they wanted in that writer's room that like it made me do it.
That's so interesting, because what you're saying, so being afraid to speak up or feeling like you're not being heard, these are statistically common things that happen. When a woman is outnumbered by men in a room, she's less likely to speak up. And in fact, she's also less likely to be heard when she does speak up, and probably more so if she's a woman of color. So even if there's not overt aggressions happening in your writer's room, these things do affect the way that we contribute.
Of course, and there's also those like tacit things that happen too that are just like no one invites you to drinks because they're all going out to drink and you can't possibly go out to drink with them because you have a pussy and they might want to, I don't know, grab it? I don't know. that was easy. I'm sorry. So yeah, there's just this constant feeling that you're different and that you can't be a part of this thing. And I think if anything, that's the thing that needs to change the most. Just this sexual tension that's perceived by some men if you're in the workplace. And it's like, even if there is that, it doesn't have to be the thing that like you're seen as. I basically pitched in the Y writers room that we were having like a conference, we were having a meeting, and every time the camera panned to me, I was just a big vagina, because that's what I felt like in the room. I felt like just a big giant vagina, like every time anyone looked at me, because I was the only vagina in the room. But anyway, just a personal experience, I don't know.
I would say from my experience, like, it definitely changes things if you're in charge of anyone, because with Reductress, we're in charge, and it's like an all-female office, which is kind of our own little like utopia. And having worked in a company before where I wasn't like in charge of the company, but I was somewhat in charge of other people, there would sometimes just be like a blind rage towards me, like in sort of like it just felt like sort of a Hillary Clinton-esque way, whereas like it didn't matter what decision you were making, the like rage was just like disproportionate to the crime.
Yeah, I mean, you were also like one of the only women like running that stuff at the theater too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's really hard, and I think like it speaks to what everyone's saying. Like, it's so hard to be the only one of anything in any room, and as much as we try to like be a diverse group, like being one of anything in the room, it seems almost, you know, as hard and counterproductive as not even being there sometimes. And the more that we can make a writer's room or a workplace look more like the country we live in, the more we can actually encourage everyone in the room to be heard and be respected. And it'll shut the guys up a little bit, but, you know, hopefully bring out a lot of other voices.
And in fact, every bit of data shows that your writer's room will be better and more collaborative and more creative.
Yes.
And if you work in a business, your business will be more profitable. And if you are America and a politician, our GDP will rise by 26%
Yeah.
if we can reach gender equality. So I'll just keep like bringing the statistical karate here
Yes.
with every point that we make.
Yes.
But yeah, like if people aren't gonna do it because it's the right thing to do, then do it because of the fucking money.
I think it also kind of goes back to your question about how feminism is different in 2016, because I think a lot of us now are in workplaces where we're not the only woman or hopefully the only person of color. You're not always like alone in things, and I think that's why we're seeing so much progress on Twitter and Facebook when we try to like voice feminist opinions, because it's like someone has your back, you know?
Someone's gonna see you fuck up. I mean, I don't know if that's true. That's often not true. So take that back. Gabby, how's it to work at Bustle?
I was just thinking the difference between I worked in a mixed gender office in the publishing industry prior to this, and just the biggest difference is none of my bosses have sexually harassed me since I started working in an all-women's office.
Congrats.
Thank you. You know, I still think there's still, you know, it's still an office. There's still, you know, power dynamic stuff and whatever other weirdness, but that sort of strange predatory power structure is not present in an all-female office, and hopefully we can export that to mixed gender offices.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, like working in an all-female office right now, we definitely are a lot freer to talk about whatever we want, no matter how gross it is.
And like come in looking like garbage.
Yeah, we look like garbage every day. But we work in a co-working space, so like people can still hear us. We just pretend like nobody can.
But I wonder if maybe acting like you work in an all-female office is kind of like the solution.
Exactly.
Like, you know, I had this boss who would just like swan around the place in his like straw fedora, pronouncing Wikipedia, and like he just like thought he was the king. And I was like, what if we just acted like that? Maybe it wouldn't have gotten. Maybe he would have stayed in his place. I don't know.
So Jessica, I know your book, you give concrete advice about how to deal with specific workplace problems. So I was wondering if you could just all chime in on a specific workplace problem that we might encounter. The guy who is obsessed with you being on your period, who's always like, is this because you're on your period? What's up with your period? Blah, blah, blah. How are you supposed to, let's say you encounter that man, how are you supposed to respond in a way that diffuses the situation productively?
I mean, I hope nobody's really saying, are you on your period?
I was gonna say.
I literally wish someone would say that. I wish someone would come up to me.
Like, tell them to go fuck
Go
themselves.
fuck yourself.
Yeah.
That's exactly what
But I do think that a micro version of that is, you seem really upset. Like, are you okay? And whether or not that's like they actually think you're on your period or you're just being like an emotional woman, what the research shows is that female and male emotion is perceived differently. So when a woman expresses an opinion or says something in perhaps an authoritative tone, we view her as angry or hysterical and emotional. And probably that emotion must have to do with something like her baby at home crying or like a breakup with a boyfriend, and not just the fact that like maybe you fucked up your work and that's why I'm upset. But when a man expresses the same exact type of, it may be anger, it may be just an expression of firmness, we view it as passion. So men can basically yell at work and be seen as passionate. And if a woman is to yell, then she's viewed as fucking crazy and penalized in an office environment. So what is the like hack or fight move for how to deal with that? I mean, if a guy's asking you if you're on your period, like, tell him to go fuck himself. If he's saying, is it that time of the month, you're gonna be like, yeah, the time of the month where I'm about to do your performance review.
Oh, burn.
And then I think in other scenarios, it's just like we need to be more cognizant of recognizing that the way that we perceive male and female emotion is really different.
How would Reductress recommend you deal with that person?
mean,
I don't mean to put you guys on the spot.
If it was like a comedy environment and this person considers themselves like a comedian, I would be like, that's a horrible joke. Like you need to like go work on that.
I mean, if you're looking to the book for advice, I believe we have a variety of foot stomps to let him know who's boss that you guys can look at. There's some good ones.
Okay, that'll be helpful to look up after this. I'd like to talk about the election because
I haven't talked about that at all, so this is really exciting for me.
I haven't gotten a chance to. So I feel that, no, this is not an observation unique to me. Everybody feels that this election has stoked anti-women sentiment in a way that people feel freer to use certain kinds of language. It's entered the public discourse. Have you guys experienced this on a personal level, or what is it like to be a woman in comedy or media and to deal with this year or 16 months?
I mean, I think personally, like I'm seeing the worst come out in people I know who might be leaning in that direction, just like online, and you kind of see them like talk to me in gendered ways that I'd never heard at Thanksgiving dinner before, and it's kind of just like bringing out everybody's dirty laundry in terms of like how they actually see women, not as people. In my family, mostly my cousins.
Yeah, it's like, it feels like dehumanizing to me to have anyone I know look at Trump in like a less than disgusted way. Like any amount of like apathy, like or sympathy for him, I'm just kind of like, do you hate me? Like, why? I don't know.
So I of course think that Donald Trump is a disgusting human being and hopefully will be put in jail after this for the many transgressions that he may in fact be tried for. However, he may in fact be feminism's best friend because he has brought to light things that we have been complaining about for decades and nobody has believed us. And so the way that we are publicly talking about the reality of what he's saying, like pussy grabbing, oh, that's sexual assault. Like AKA what you mean here is sexual assault. That's not just a funny thing. And locker room talk is actually, like Michelle Obama said, like that's actually an insult to men who do not speak that way, of which I think describes most men. So I think that what this election has done from that perspective has been to bring to the forefront so many of the issues that we've been fighting against for such a long time. And now they're on video, now they're recorded, now you can watch it and you can't question it. And it's actually been interesting because I don't know that in my lifetime there has been a moment where I have seen my peers go out into the street and protest and build human chains around Trump Tower. Like we talk about online protest and I think that's a great thing, but people are really angry right now and I think that that is good because we have to talk about this stuff, and finally there's a record of it that's showing that it's real.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's given us like a high-profile case study of every single aspect of rape culture, just like through one man, like including rape.
Right. The veil has been lifted, and we're now in the upside down, and he's the giant monster, just like letting it all open. So we have to deal with him head on.
But I mean, it's also been fucking chilling to have like that veil pulled and be like, wow, so many people are just, I guess, going around grabbing pussies.
And so many women are just like, it's fine.
It's life.
Like,
Boys will be
Well, or don't even realize that that's not meant to happen. You know, I think it's become so normalized. And like who hasn't had their pussy grabbed on the subway? You know, like at some point or another. And yet probably a lot of us at the time have been like, God, that really sucks. But like, there's nothing I can do about it. So I think that we're talking about it, which is good. But like that said, knock on wood, like I'm terrified.
But yeah, but on the other hand, there's hundreds of thousands of dollar merch business, I bet, on like Trump that bitch paraphernalia. And I feel like the word bitch has also has had a really good year.
A renaissance?
Renaissance for both the Trump side and Clinton and general women lovers. Do you guys have any opinion about the rise of it? Like, is this good that we're reclaiming it? Or, I mean, this is such a general question, but I just can't help but see it constantly in diverging situations. Guys, bitch, good or bad?
Mixed.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one other thing that I've just been thinking about. What do we think of Ivanka Trump? Is she going to be welcomed back into her New York fashionable scene? As I think this goes hand in hand maybe with the question of empowerment, women's empowerment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how her friendship with Chelsea is going to go after this. This is going to be a tough one.
People are protesting her, whatever it is that she sells. Like people are refusing to buy what she sells. I think that she's going to struggle. Like she's built a brand on empowerment. Like she is what we were talking about previously, empowerment. She's got a website called Women Who Work, where they do like interviews with powerful women. I mean, like she's capitalizing on the same stuff that like you would say Bustle or Jezebel has been writing about for a long time, and like, is she going to be able to continue that? I hope not, because I don't think that, I don't think she can come back from this. Is my response.
I think she'll be fine.
I think she'll be fine too. I think I would
She'll
also
be
disagree that Jezebel and Bustle have been promoting that kind of empowerment feminism, but
no, that's not what I didn't mean it that way. Just that she's like kind of trying to infringe on your market in a way.
But she's actually, I think, a great example.
I don't think she's doing it well.
Empowerment marketing, kind of like, she was sort of down with calling out sexual harassment. It was trendy, and now she's, down with, pussy grabbing racism because it's a job.
I personally think that there's kind of a brand of kind of inoffensive empowerment feminism that will embrace her again because they're nice and they don't want to be mean to a woman.
I mean, like the most convenient brand of feminism to support is like women working harder in any way possible. So it's like that's what Republicans are going to glom onto. That's what like Megyn Kelly is going to glom onto. It's just what's convenient, but they don't want to get on board with what's inconvenient.
My theory is like she's actually going to vote for Hillary. Like secretly.
She forgot to register to vote or something like that. So like.
And so just generally, I want to go back because I want to stop for questions soon. But just practically, when you guys are writing and you want to write for women and about women, how do you approach that specifically, like women's writing for women? What does that mean to you guys? Are you thinking about like women?
I mean, in comedy, there's like a phrase, truth in comedy, and obviously what's true is funnier. So we just try to reflect on women's actual experiences and like the actual day-to-day of being a woman, which when you're in what's been sort of a male-dominated industry hasn't always been touched on. So it's kind of makes it easier because you're just like, just write about what you know.
Yeah, but it's a lot of it is just the stuff that we've been taking for granted, like our own blind spots and how we're oppressed in an environment, or like even just those little microaggressions we don't notice until someone actually points at them. So like we're always trying to find those holes in the discussion and bring them to light.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's different maybe about specifically writing for a female audience is like assuming that they will not be, I don't know, grossed out by, you know, like I had a nipple hair or whatever, things that are normal parts of female life that you may be shy about, I don't know, writing about on a non-female oriented website.
I mean, I just try to write as most myself as possible, because I think the more of an individual I am, the more you allow other people to be individuals, and that's all I think anyone is actually working for anyway.
Yeah, I think like I try to think about it as just writing for humans. And I've had interesting conversations as somebody in media, and I've been in journalism for a long time, and for the past 10 years or so, I've written about gender or women's issues, as it is often dubbed. And so at various points, I've had to make the decision, like, do I want to write for an all-female audience, or do I want to try to get these stories into the mainstream publications and have them be about women? And because I started at a news magazine, and this was before Jezebel had taken off, this was before there were all of these different audiences, basically I think there's space for both. I think that there's huge value in speaking to women on their own, but I also think that we have to be writing about these issues or talking about these issues in just general environments, and like they shouldn't be ghettoized to like the women's section. And I frequently face this criticism because I write for the style section of the New York Times, and so even when I'm doing very serious stories about like consent on campus or Hillary Clinton and gender in the workplace, it's still in the style section. And so I very frequently get the argument, like, why did they put this in the style section? And it's valid.
Okay, so before we ask for questions, I don't know what the question situation is, like if there's a mic or not, but we'll do, nope, okay. Before we do that, we're gonna play a game that I got from the book. It's so fun, but okay, so the game is it feminist? And I'm gonna name a thing and you guys say if it's feminist or not, okay? Just chime in. The Bible.
No. Feminist.
Okay. Toe ring.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
You do you.
Beef.
Sure.
I'm gonna go no.
I don't either. Credit card.
Yes.
Yes.
Are you using it to buy beef?
Women
I
weren't
don't know.
allowed to have them without their husband's permission until 1974.
On demand blow dries.
I think it can be.
Is that a sex thing?
Maybe blow dry.
Like a hair blow.
Okay, like a blowout. Got it.
Is it like unsolicited blow dry?
Good question.
I don't know. Something to think about.
Feminist.
Consent. A consensual
Go with yes.
blow
A
dry.
consensual blow dry feminist.
Active consensual.
Cat ownership.
Feminist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anthony Weiner.
No.
Okay, that's all I have. If people have questions, they could raise their hand, and then you'll
You want to
stand
ask
up.
us
Other
if
things,
we
yeah.
think something's feminist?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have a feminist object. I had a question.
Yeah.
I was thinking about a friend who recently said to me, I was talking about Reductress, and she said, be careful where you look for misogyny, because you're going to find it everywhere, and it's going to make you bitter. And so, like, that kind of connects to how do you relate to the world still without, like, internalizing constant microaggressions and things like that, and, like, how do you also fit into that yourself and, like, present yourself and consider your values in that way?
Can everybody hear the question? Okay.
I guess the best way for me to process that kind of awareness problem is through humor. Like, definitely every day in the office that like something in the news is bad and we're upset about it, we process it, and then we talk about what's weird about it, what's like dumb about it, and then we find an angle and make a joke, and it's cathartic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I think sometimes getting it out there through a joke is our way of like pointing it out to other people, so we're like, at least we're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely like acknowledge the rage, you know what I mean? Like don't ignore it, but also live your life and be happy.
Great question.
Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I'm Black first. You know what I mean? Like, I am so much more, being Black is so much more oppressive to me than being a woman. I feel, I don't even want to, I feel like I can't even explain it because it's just, I am just Black first. And I've always been aware of that first before I ever knew what feminism was. I was aware of racism before I was aware of misogyny, if that makes sense. Like, since I was a child, I've been made aware of the fact that I'm different because I'm Black, not because I'm a woman. So I think that that's one, intersectional like issue of feminism that, as a Black woman, I just feel that, I was much more aware of that before anything else. Was that the question?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I will try to tell this quickly. So I grew up in Seattle. It was like utopia of liberalism, progressive parents, rah, rah, rah. You can be anything you set your mind to. Had a lot of female leadership. They considered themselves feminists. And so I was like, I don't need feminism. Like, we've already won the war. And then I got to my first job at Newsweek magazine, and all of this shit started happening. I wasn't getting ahead as fast. My ideas were being stolen and used under man's bylines. The guy who sat next to me and had in the cubicle next to me and had the same exact job title and job description was making $10,000 more than I was. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. Oh, that's what they're talking about. And for me, it was discovering that at my own workplace, Newsweek magazine, the women of that company in the year 1970 had sued for gender discrimination in the first ever lawsuit of its kind. And this is now the subject of this Amazon series called The Good Girls Revolt. And for me, discovering that what I was experiencing in this workplace had in fact also been experienced by these women 40 years ago who had paved the way for me to be where I was, allowed me to realize that this was a systemic issue, and it was a systemic issue that was still existing. And so that was my quote unquote click moment.
Yeah, I would agree. I also didn't really realize how much I needed feminism until I was like out in the workforce. And then I think actually a big part of it was starting Reductress, which we didn't start with like purely feminist goals at all. Like, we were just like, let's make fun of women's magazines. But doing it, like, we had so many like times we were questioned in a weird way. Like, by doing an overtly female-driven thing, I feel like faced a heavier amount of criticism and scrutiny and double standards. And I think that really increased my awareness of feminism, not to mention all the feminist content we've done since. But I also think I leveled up a little bit in feminism when I had kids, because I was just like, oh, fuck, like, this sucks. There's just so many aspects of it, especially, like, I own my own company, so I have a certain amount of freedom for when I need to leave or do what I need to do with my kids. But when I imagine someone with a regular 9-to-5 who maybe is living paycheck to paycheck, it, like, scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, yes to all of that. And I would say, similarly, like, I kind of grew up and I'm like, what? Of course, like, equality, duh, took it for granted. But I think beyond even just, like, being a queer woman and coming out, I think when I first started writing and performing queer works that were, like, explicitly about, like, being a queer woman in society, really was the time that I kind of, like, laid myself bare to the world and said like, this is who I am and how I feel about the world. And from then on, it's like feminism is just kind of baked into all of that. So that was my moment.
I was raised to really aggressively identify as a feminist, but I think it was all very theoretical to me. As a kid, it was mostly just a way to like start shit at school. And then I moved. I went to a very hippie college and just kind of not noticed any discrimination. I'm sure it was going on around me constantly. But then I moved to New York and was like, oh, like men follow me down the street at night. Like someone rubbed their dick on me on the subway and I'm like being asked to get coffee at work. Like the stuff that I thought was all from the 70s is actually still going on right now. So that was sort of when I realized, oh, it's a thing that you're actively still happening.
I'll also chime in. I was also raised to be feminist, but I realized it in practice in my first journalism job when I had the same title as a man, and he got paid $20,000 more than I did. So like you. Okay.
What did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't find out how grotesquely overpaid he was until I left, but I did leave after 7 months.
Good.
Yeah.
I have a question about Reductress. So I don't know how long ago it was, but maybe a couple of months ago, you guys had done your whole homepage about like sexual assault because of like incidents that had happened in the comedy scene. That was like kind of went sort of viral, and that was great, by the way. And it was really funny and it was really well done. And I was wondering if you guys could like talk about that a little bit today, or the events around it.
Yeah, sure. So just for some background for everyone, there was kind of a rape scandal in the comedy community. A man in the community had raped at least 2 people and sexually assaulted a few others, as far as we know, and had been banned from a theater. And what we were seeing was just this huge online discussion. Some men were blaming women and blaming the victims, attacking women who defend the women.
A lot of like shooting the messenger, like unhelpful advice about how they should have gone to the police before they went to the theater, and like just ignorance about what a woman goes through when she tries to report a rape. And
so as if the event itself wasn't upsetting enough, like the discussion around it just was bumming us out so much in the office. We couldn't get any work done that Monday we came in, and by Tuesday we put out a call for some pitches on it and got like hundreds of pitches about this, and we were like, why don't we just do a homepage on it and try to tackle every angle we can of rape culture?
Yeah, there was just like too much there in the discussion that was upsetting us to just do like one joke about like rape being bad, so yeah, we just did the homepage takeover. And basically we were all writing at least one thing in-house, and a couple of our outside contributors helped as well. And I think we decided to do it at like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday and more or less knocked it out by like 6 or 7 p.m. And like nothing about it was really like for the purposes of creating content. It was all just us processing our feelings. So the response was like not really expected, because we were just kind of like, well, we got to do this so that we can move on to tomorrow, like it was all we could think about.
So that's how it went. The first question is a lot. The answer to the first question is a lot less controversial than you think. I think we got like hacked or something like through the Discus plugin, and we're just like, you know what, not worth it. So we're just like, shut down Discus, have it out on Facebook. So that's why. As for your second question, I don't know. Why do people think that the Onion is real? People just like. Yeah, there's like a whole blog about like people who think the Onion is real. But I think like especially because like satirizing women's media is like a newish thing compared to what the Onion's been doing for 20 odd years. People really don't see the differences sometimes between what we do and what like actual women's media does.
It also like sort of lays bare their perceptions of women, some of the things that they think are real, because it like shows that they think women are so dumb.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess one good difference is like, you know, The Onion will do something like Area Man does this silly thing and everyone's like, haha, people are funny. But if we do something where it's like Area Woman does X, there'll be people on Twitter that are like, see, women are all like this. Women are terrible. This woman should die. And like, it just like this like fictional woman becomes this like object of attack just as much as any Twitter avatar would be. So there's definitely a lot of people just like throwing a lot of their own preconceived notions onto what we make. Yeah.
Another online thing that's happened is that at specifically Jezebel, people will say, you know, Reductress is making fun of specifically you, right? So people love to point out when women are being made fun of.
We constantly get the question that it's like, you hate Jezebel, right? And we're like, no, we're making fun of certain things in women's media patterns.
Also, no one loves Reductress more than people who work in women's media.
Exactly.
Like it's all we read all day long.
So true.
I think the specifics of our book, I think will like become outdated because there's stuff about like dating apps and stuff that hopefully will not be they'll hopefully not be fighting the same fights as we are. Maybe some of it'll stay relevant. I do worry sometimes as a feminist who likes to point out what's wrong, going back to the question about being bitter, like there comes a point, I think, where we will have won some of those battles, and I want to make sure I'm not still complaining about it. So hopefully I'm like aware of my surroundings.
We're gonna be the grizzled old feminists. They're like, you don't know what we fought for.
Yeah. I got men to stop sending dick pics.
You fought in the dick pic wars, and your kids are gonna be proud of you.
Yeah. Does everybody have opinions on teaching children about bad things?
I mean, yeah, I think we should talk about it. I think that for a long time, it was you don't want to scare your kids and you tell them they can do whatever they set their mind to. So yeah, I think a more realistic view of race relations and gender relations in this country is going to be beneficial. I also think that younger people in general are much more educated and smart and savvy about these issues than I was when I was their age. Like, it's been really encouraging to talk to young women and men, middle school and high school, who have this level of media literacy. Like, they're reading all of these sites and they get it. Like, they're not thinking it's not funny. And they talk about feminism in a really intersectional way, and they know that that's the way it needs to be. And so I think that, A, maybe young people are smarter than we give them credit for, but B, certainly it's good to have these conversations early.
Yeah, I mean, I think a father teaching his daughter about being a feminist is so profound, and him telling her that she's a person that deserves respect and might not get it from people that look like him is like super, world changing to a little girl or to a kid that, will eventually have to face that stuff anyway. So,
and also talking to our sons. Like, I
course.
think that is the counterpoint to so much of this conversation has been like, around politics has been like, think of your daughters and everyone has a mother and a sister. But it's like, no, men, like if you're going to be teaching this as a father who's enlightened, then like you're going to be teaching it to both genders. And I think it's important to talk about that too.
Would any of you be interested in fundraising for Hillary Clinton before the election?
Already did.
Yes.
Or encouraging your followers on social media to do so because polls are tightening and it's really scary?
I mean, yeah. Guys, you gonna do it? Get over there. It's fun. There's sometimes pizza too. Do it.
I mean, every time you see a Trump rally, it's just like, oh my God.
It can be, I mean, it can be
Yeah.
something like that, or it can be something extremely small. Like, for example, something that I notice all the time is the, like, in meetings, like, sorry, but, or like, oh, I just think that, or, you know, asking questions when you're actually saying something.
I mean, I think the one thing that I've noticed some women do is like differentiate themselves from other women if they're like in a group, like maybe there's 3 women in a group of like 8 people or something like that, and one girl says something that isn't great, and then she's like just quick to differentiate herself from that person and just be like, well, I think, well, whatever, instead of encouraging that person and supporting them and trying to piggyback and just raise them up instead of leaving them in the wind, if you know what I mean. There was that great article, I think it was in the New York Times, about what the women in President Obama's cabinet do whenever they speak in a meeting. Amplification.
Yes.
I thought that was amazing because instead of just shutting that one woman out and just being like, I'm not like her, basically what you're saying is I'm not like her, I'm not dumb like her or whatever, help her out, figure it out. But yeah, I think that's one thing that some women do. They get very anxious about the fact that they might be viewed in the same way that they're observing that woman be viewed. And they are quick to differentiate themselves and throw that woman to the wind. But it's just like, never do that because you're going to need it.
I think I second that, like treating other women as allies, not your enemies. Like this is structural. The reason why women have been taught that they must compete against one another is because traditionally there's been this pie of leadership and this tiny slice for women. And so if you're all competing for that tiny slice, then of course you're going to want to differentiate yourself or elbow the woman next to you. But I think supporting each other is so, so important and like cannot be overestimated.
I think also, like, so many of us have been subtly trained psychologically to, like, fear and hate other women and, like, gossip about them or just, like, be annoyed at women's voices or all these little things that we don't consciously realize that we're doing day to day. So I think there's also, like, a certain amount of, like, psychoanalyzing going on. Like, I, like, try to analyze myself and my snap judgments about people and be more careful about, like, whose work I'm criticizing or just little things like that as I go through my day to day, because I do see myself doing those things.
Yeah, I second that.
I think there's also a lot of maybe like blaming yourself when you should be blaming society. Like women are kind of hard on themselves for not being maybe like feminist enough. Like, oh, like, you know, I judge my body or I can't speak up. Like, what's wrong with me? And it's like, that's not your fault. That's how you've been trained to act your whole life. Take it easy on yourself.
If there's one quick question, we can do it. And if there's not, okay.
I'm already busy. Sorry.
Wait, let's do this one male question. It's good to have men involved in this conversation. That's why I'm not giving special treatment to him. He has to pay 21% more for my book. Oh, God. Yeah. One sentence
We'll
or
try
less,
it.
and
We'll
it must
try.
end in a question mark. It's a great question and quick.
I think listening is huge. Like, I think this goes with race issues too. Like, some of us have to learn to be more comfortable, myself included, just like sitting back and like listening to the conversation. And that goes with like people offering up ideas in a workplace setting as well.
Yeah, and after you listen, try not to start the next sentence with a but, try to start it with an and.
Or like trying to like relate it back to you. I know it's like so tempting, like when someone shares their own personal experience or their own idea, it's like,
Yeah. So yeah, active listening. Anyone else?
So I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll keep my answer
Yeah,
short
okay.
too. I mean, I think coming to events like this, number one, like being open to talking about these issues. I also think being willing to like fuck up. Like these are sensitive issues. Sometimes they're tricky. I think it's similar with race. Like you want to be a good ally, and maybe sometimes you're gonna screw up. But like those are the necessary steps that we need to take in order to get to a better place. And you can get my book, which has a PSA. It's a penile service announcement, and it has 16 things that men can do every day to help women in the workplace, but I can't give them away because I gotta make money. No, I'm just kidding. I will give them away. I can talk to you later.
I mean, along with those things, I think asking questions is as important as listening and, you know, being an ally and things like that. Ask questions like what you said. Like if there's something that you think is you just couldn't know because you're not a girl, so you couldn't know. Just ask, and like it might open up worlds you never knew about just because you were like, oh, that's a totally new perspective I would have never known just because I asked her. So ask her.
This is also ultra specific, but tell your female coworkers how much money you make. Take them out to happy hour. Tell them how much money you make.
I would also say wait 10 seconds before you make a joke and just like think about it. And that's all the time. This is so fun. Thank you guys. Buy the book.